I was 30 when the truth hit me, but I still hear it like he said it yesterday. "You're not my blood, Caleb. Don't act like this is your house." Rodney Keaton didn't yell, didn't even raise an eyebrow. He just said it flat, like it wasn't meant to hurt, like it was a fact he figured I should have already known. That line sat in my chest for years, like a nail under the skin. I was 11 when he said it. I'd cracked a glass in the sink, just slipped. I was trying to help clean up after dinner. The glass broke, and he turned from the fridge, looked right through me, and dropped that line like it was nothing. My mother, Carla, was wiping crumbs off the counter. She froze, but didn't turn around, didn't say anything, just kept brushing crumbs like silence was safer. And from then on, that's all I got from her. Silence. For years. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. Rodney wasn't a screamer. He cut with calm. When Owen needed sneakers, Rodney bought the best ones in the store. When I asked if I could get some too, he said, "Owen's my son. You'll manage." Always quiet, always final. Owen was younger by 2 years, but he wasn't like Rodney. At dinner, he'd sneak me an extra roll and whisper, "Don't tell Dad." I never did. I felt guilty taking it, but I didn't want to say no either. It was the only time I felt like someone saw me. By 16, I knew how things went. Rodney didn't scream or hit, but I got the message in every word he didn't say. When I reached for seconds at dinner, he'd nod toward Owen's plate. "Save some for family." I stopped reaching after a while. My 18th birthday. I came home from work and found 2 suitcases by the door. My name was on a post-it. Rodney sat in his recliner, TV on, like it was just another Tuesday. He didn't mute the game, just said, "18 means you're done here. You were never my responsibility." Carla was in the doorway, holding a dish towel in both hands like it was a signed contract. She didn't say, "Stop," didn't say, "He's my son." She didn't say a thing. Owen came out to the porch and hugged me tight. His voice cracked when he said, "Don't go far. You're my brother, no matter what he says." I left anyway. I told myself it was freedom, but it felt like walking into a hallway after the door slams and nobody turns on the light. I didn't know then that a case file with my real name had been gathering dust for years. I didn't know someone out there had my eyes and was still looking. Back then, I believed Rodney, no blood, no place. So, I walked. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just got up, put on the cleanest shirt I had, and walked the 6 blocks to the county office with my shoulder burning like it had glass in it. The front desk clerk pointed to the sign-in sheet without looking up. I scribbled my name and sat in a plastic chair with a cracked armrest, pretending like I wasn't embarrassed to be there. The waiting room smelled like old air and floor wax. A baby cried across from me. The woman holding him looked more tired than I felt. I kept my head down, chewing the inside of my cheek, trying to act like this was normal, like it wasn't a sign I'd finally failed. The caseworker called my name. I stood too fast, almost blacked out, and followed her down a hallway that hummed with flickering lights. She wore a maroon cardigan and had a voice like someone who'd seen too much. "What brings you in today?" she asked, typing as she spoke. "I messed up my shoulder," I said. "Can't lift it. Can't work." She glanced up. "You filed for disability yet?" "No," I said. "This ain't permanent. I just need help to get through the next month." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. "Let's get started." Filling out the forms took longer than I expected. Every question felt like a punch. Do you have income? Do you have support? Have you ever been hospitalized? Do you have dependents? I checked no more than anything else. Each no felt like a reminder that I wasn't much of anything. "You'll need to see a county doctor," she said. "Then we can determine eligibility." "How long's that take?" "Could be a week," she said. "Maybe 2. I nodded and stood, biting back a grunt when my shoulder lit up. I thanked her anyway. Polite habits die slow. Outside, the sky looked like rain. I walked with my hands in my jacket pockets and my head low, not because I was ashamed, but because the wind cut through me like I didn't belong anywhere. That night, I lay on the mattress in the barbershop room, one pillow under my head, one against my shoulder to keep it from moving. I stared at the water stains on the ceiling until the patterns turned into things that weren't real. My phone buzzed. It was Owen again. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Better than last week," I said. "Doc appointment coming up." "Good." Let me know if you need anything. I'm fine, I said, too quick. There was a pause. You don't have to prove anything, Caleb. Yeah, well, I said, try unlearning that after 18 years. I hung up before I got soft. I turned off the light and closed my eyes. The last thought I had before sleep was simple. I wasn't going back to that warehouse. If I had to crawl to something better, I would. I walked into the county office the next morning with my shoulders still aching and the paperwork instructions folded in my back pocket. I took a number, sat under buzzing lights, and tried to convince myself this was nothing but red tape. Just forms, signatures, done. I kept repeating that, so my pride wouldn't drag me back out the door. When my number popped on the screen, I stepped up to Ms. Patel's counter. She had neat handwriting and a calm voice that didn't match the chaos of the room. She asked for my social security number, typed it in, and froze like someone had pressed pause on her. The air shifted. My stomach tightened because I knew that look too well. I'd seen it every time someone realized I didn't quite fit wherever I was standing. She blinked fast and waved over a supervisor. Mr. Santos came up behind her and leaned over the monitor. His eyes landed on my face, and something in them changed. It wasn't anger, it was recognition he didn't want to explain. Sir, Ms. Patel whispered, this number returned a match in the NCIC and NCMEC databases. I almost laughed because nothing in my life ever tilted toward interesting. But the tone in her voice said this wasn't the fun kind of drama. She lowered her voice even more. It's associated with an infant reported missing almost 30 years ago. My mouth dried up. I tried to grab onto any sentence that sounded sane, but everything came out tangled. I asked if maybe there was a mix-up. She didn't answer. Santos picked up a phone, turned slightly away, and spoke in that quiet government voice that warns you the room isn't yours anymore. A guard drifted over and checked the exit like he was pretending it was routine. Phones kept ringing, but people around us slowed down like the air thickened. My heartbeat got loud enough that I could feel it in my bad shoulder. Then a woman in a navy jacket walked in with a badge already in her hand. Whitaker, she said. Dana Whitaker, FBI, Crimes Against Children. She didn't glare or puff herself up. She just sat across from me at a side table and looked steady in a way that made running feel stupid. Caleb, she said, do you remember anything before age 5? Sure, I said, too fast to sound honest. I reached for something concrete, some toy, some room, some smell, and all I hit was static. A white crib, humming. That was it. My throat tightened because I didn't know what that meant. She asked what hospital I was born in, who my first doctor was. I opened my mouth and came up empty. She didn't judge, she just kept going. What year did your father pass? I repeated what I'd been told. When I was around 3, sometime in the late 1990s. When she asked his name, nothing came. I realized I had never heard one. Whitaker pulled a thick folder from her bag. Red label. Active case. She slid a baby photo across the table. Dark hair, green eyes, same eyes staring back at me from every mirror I'd ever used. When you were born, she said. Your name was Evan Klein. You were taken from a grocery store parking lot in June of 1995. My whole body went cold, like my bones were pulling away from each other. I pushed my chair back because I needed space or air or both. She kept her voice calm. You weren't abandoned, Caleb. You were taken. I stood up. They didn't cuff me. They didn't even put me in the back of a cruiser. Just drove me across town in a black SUV with government plates and tinted windows. I stared out the window and watched the power lines cut through the sky like threads holding everything up. I didn't speak. I didn't trust what would come out if I did. Agent Whitaker sat next to me, voice low like she didn't want to crack the air. We located Carla Keaton. Located, I said, rolling the word in my mouth like it was poison. She tried to leave the state this afternoon, Whitaker said. Bus station downtown, one-way ticket. I didn't answer. My teeth were locked tight. The building they brought me to looked like every other gray slab downtown. Inside, they walked me through silent halls to a room with metal chairs and a table too clean. A camera stared at us from the ceiling like it didn't blink. Carla sat already cuffed, eyes swollen, hands twitching like she was trying to figure out what apology would work. Caleb, she whispered, like saying my name would undo anything. Don't call me that, I said as I sat down. She started crying instantly, hands shaking, lip trembling, the whole act. I didn't move. I wasn't going to give her what she came for. Tell the truth, I said. All of it. My hands were flat on the table, pressed down so I wouldn't reach for anything. She looked at me like she'd forgotten how to blink. I lost a baby, she said. Before you. A boy, born early. He died. She looked past me like she was somewhere else. Rodney blamed me, said I was broken, said I'd killed his only son. A tight heat crawled up my chest. I said nothing. 1 week later, she went on, I saw a woman with a baby outside a grocery store. She looked away for a second. I heard Rodney in my head. I thought if I brought him another boy, he'd stay. My stomach turned. I clenched my jaw so hard I felt it in my ears. You took me. She nodded, slow, like she could shrink the damage that way. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. She said it again and again, quieter each time, like if she said it long enough. The room would crack open and let her escape through the floor. You told me my dad died, I said. You let Rodney treat me like trash. You stood there when he threw me out. She shook her head like that wasn't fair. He knew, she whispered. He knew you weren't his. He hated you for it. I begged him to wait until you were 18. I thought if we made it that far, we could figure something out. I was scared. Scared? I snapped. You were scared? I was the one who got taken. The chair screeched when I stood up. Agent Whitaker stepped in, calm but close. Carla looked smaller than I remembered. When cold case teams started digging again, Rodney said you had to go. He told me, kick him out. He's not worth losing everything for. I stared at her. Did you ever love me? She didn't speak at first. Then she nodded. I did. I do. I looked at her face, the cuffs, the shaking lips, and I knew one thing for sure. Love without truth is just another kind of lie. I turned and walked out. Agent Whitaker walked me into a private room just off the Bureau's field office. 4 chairs, white walls, a table that looked borrowed from a hospital. Every time I shifted my weight, the chair squeaked loud enough to make me want to stop breathing. They're 10 minutes out, she said. I stood in the corner with my hands in my pockets like I was waiting for someone to accuse me of something. I didn't know where to look, what to say, or what I was supposed to feel. Whitaker leaned against the wall near the door and said, You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say. I nodded, but didn't answer. The door clicked open behind her. A woman came in first. Petite. Fragile in the way people are when they've held their breath too long. Her hands were covering her mouth, and her eyes scanned the room like she was afraid this wasn't real. Then her eyes hit mine, green, with an amber ring I'd never seen in a mirror, but somehow knew, and she buckled. Evan, she said, and her voice cracked. My baby. She stepped toward me like she didn't trust her legs. I didn't move. I didn't know if I could. Behind her came a man with wide shoulders and gray at his jaw. His face was raw, like crying had been his job for the last 20 years, and he just came off shift. I'm Robert, he said. Your dad. I said the only thing that made it out of my throat. I don't remember you. The room went still. Elise, that's what Whitaker had called her, nodded gently. You were 6 months old when you were taken. We never expected you to remember. We just prayed you were still alive. Someone lingered near the doorway. Taller than me, lean, fidgety. Looked like a guy who could talk himself out of trouble and into it faster. I'm Jordan, he said. Your brother. He stepped forward like he couldn't stop himself. You don't know me, he said, but I used to tell your baby photo about my birthdays, about my dumb baseball cards. I said I'd teach you to ride a bike. I talked to you like you were always going to come back. He was born after I was taken, and he'd spent more time with a framed photo than a real brother. I didn't cry when Carla broke down in that cold room. I didn't cry when Whitaker showed me a baby photo and said I'd been missing for 30 years. But when Jordan said he'd been saving a seat for me his whole life, I broke. Right there in front of strangers with my face. Elise stepped closer and asked, Can I touch you? I gave the smallest nod. Her fingers touched my cheek like she was afraid I'd vanish if she pushed too hard. I didn't vanish. I stood there and let her hold my face while tears hit her blouse. Robert stepped in, arms around us both, solid and warm and shaking. I felt the weight of it, the grief, the hope, the years nobody could return. Jordan leaned in too, forehead pressed to mine like we'd done this 1,000 times. I didn't know how to carry any of it yet, but I let them hold me. That first night in the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed and just stared at the blackout curtains, waiting for my head to settle. The room was clean, stiff, too quiet. There was a laminated breakfast menu on the desk and a Bible in the drawer. I didn't touch either. The next morning, Elise called. "Did you eat anything yet?" she asked. Her voice had a kind of light tension to it, like she didn't want to push but couldn't help it. "I'm good," I said. "Cereal, nothing fancy." She sighed, and I could picture her pacing while holding the phone with both hands. "Robert's sending you something." 10 minutes later, my email dinged. Baby pictures, me in a bare onesie, blurry and drooling on a rug. Another with a tiny cake and a candle shaped like a 6. I didn't recognize the room, the toys, or the faces in the background, but I stared at it for a long time anyway. Jordan showed up around noon, knocked once, then called me from the hallway. "I got burgers and fries. Lobby food is no good, and you shouldn't trust it." He stood outside until I told him to come in. We ate in silence at first, both of us sitting on the floor like it was a dorm room and not a federal holdover. "This is weird, right?" he said, halfway through his burger. "Like, all of it." "Yeah," I said. "It's weird." Later that night, Whitaker asked if I wanted to see Carla again. "For closure," she said, like it was a form she needed me to sign. I went. The room had a glass wall now, a metal stool bolted to the floor, and phones that smelled like bleach. Carla was already seated, hands folded like she thought prayer would matter. I picked up the receiver and said, "I'm not here to comfort you. I want answers." She jumped right in, same story, fear, grief, Rodney's pressure. She said she lied because she was scared of losing me. I said she lost me anyway. She looked smaller this time. "He used my guilt," she said. "He said if I told the truth we'd both go to jail." I believed him. "That doesn't cover 30 years, I said. Her eyes dropped. She nodded like the weight finally landed. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't forgive you either." She broke, soft sobs, barely moving. I watched for a second, then hung up the phone and walked out without looking back. Outside, in the parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was Owen. "I saw the news," he said. "All of it. You were always my brother, no matter what he said. I still want you in my life, if you want that." I leaned against the wall. "Yeah," I said. "I want that too." That night, Elise hugged me like she didn't trust the universe not to steal me again. Robert double-checked the door locks. Jordan told a joke that barely landed but made me laugh anyway. For the first time in years, nothing felt fake. The courtroom smelled like paper and panic. Everything was beige, the walls, the carpet, the folders on the tables. Even the judge looked like he'd been printed out in black and white. Whitaker sat behind me while I gave my statement. I was in one of those state interview rooms first, the kind where the lights hum and the air's never quite right. She asked if I was ready. I said, "I'll say it like he said it, that's all." I told the recorder what I remembered, Rodney's voice, always calm, always sharp. "You're not my blood. Don't act like this is your house." The beat-up suitcases on my 18th birthday. How he never once called me son. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I said it like I was reading the weather. A reporter called after that. Wanted to do a story. Put my face on the evening news. I told him no. I didn't want pity or a segment squeezed between traffic and sports. I wanted the paper trail. I wanted what Rodney did written down, where he couldn't dodge it. The county unsealed old records. Turned out he'd filed a fake affidavit when I was 4, claimed my father had died. It was typed up clean, notarized, and tucked away like it was real. That lie got me a new name, a new social security number, a new life. Nobody asked hard questions back then. One signature was enough. I stared at that affidavit until the date burned into my brain. I thought about all the times I'd tried to picture my dad and came up blank. Rodney never filled in that blank. He just erased what came before. Owen showed up when he was called, sat straight, hands folded, voice steady. "He scared me," he said about his father. We weren't allowed to talk about Caleb after he left. We weren't allowed to question anything. Watching him say that out loud, watching him pull the curtain back, it loosened something tight in my chest I hadn't even noticed was still there. The actual hearing wasn't dramatic. No slamming gavels or courtroom gasps. The clerk read off the charges in a voice like she was ordering lunch. Carla sat with her head down, crying silent tears. Rodney didn't move, just stared at the table, fixed and empty. I didn't wait for the end. I stood and walked out the second my part was done. No one followed. No one tried to sell me on closure. Elise and Robert asked if I'd let them unlock an old trust they'd kept frozen since 1995. I didn't want a windfall. I wanted a clean restart. I signed the papers and walked out with a fresh beginning instead of a check. We used part of it to wipe out my medical debt. The rest paid for shoulder surgery and a few months of physical therapy. The therapist said, "Scar tissue's honest. Hurts because it's real." That sounded about right. One morning, I woke up after 7 hours of solid sleep. No throbbing shoulder, no spinning mind. Just quiet. It didn't erase anything, but it let me breathe. That was the first time in a long while I looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. Elise called it a hallway with too many names. I called it a punch in the chest. The Klein Search Project sat in a converted post office building with brick walls and bad lighting. Nothing flashy, just quiet grit and old chairs that creaked when you leaned too far. The first time I walked that hallway, I stopped halfway down. A boy stared back at me from a pinned-up photo. About 8, brown hair, wide, scared eyes like he knew something bad was about to happen, but didn't have words for it yet. I felt it deep in my ribs. A woman came up beside me, close enough to hear my breathing. "Are you Evan Klein?" she asked. "The one who came home?" I nodded. She covered her mouth with one hand and blinked fast. "My niece has been gone 3 years. I come here to remember she's real." Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't begging for answers or hope. She just needed to say it out loud. That word, hope, still made me flinch, but in her mouth, it didn't sound like a trap. Later that day, I told Elise I wanted to help. She looked surprised at first, like maybe she thought I'd want distance from everything. "I don't want to be a face on a flyer," I said. "I want to do something that matters. I know what it's like to lose your name." She didn't ask again. She just set me up with an old case manager named Denise, who had 3 decades of stories and no patience for whining. I started sorting cold files, reading timelines, learning how to ask questions without snapping something in people. Some of the files felt too close. One case, a toddler taken from a store parking lot in Wisconsin, read like someone had ripped out a page from my life and scratched a new name on it. A detective slid the folder across the table and said, "Look it over. You'll see what most don't." He wasn't wrong. I mapped the kid's last known location, double-checked witness statements, and found a delivery window no one had logged. A gap no longer than 15 minutes, but it stuck out. I pointed it out. The team followed it. 3 weeks later, that boy was found alive in a rental house 2 towns over. When the mother dropped to her knees on the front lawn, sobbing into her hands, I had to step out and breathe. Not cry, just breathe. Felt like I was holding up something for once instead of dragging it. That moment clicked something into place. Not the broken part, not the part that got taken, the part that could carry weight and not drop it. I snapped a picture of the hallway wall on my way out that night. Rows of missing faces, names, dates, eyes that didn't blink but still begged someone to see them. I kept that photo on my phone, not for show, but as a reason. Work didn't heal me. Nothing does. But it gave my hands something honest to do. So I showed up the next day, ready to do more. Elise opened the door like it was something holy. "We kept it," she said, voice low. The room had changed, crib gone, floor redone, but the wallpaper was still there. Tiny stars, pale blue and silver, scattered across the walls like someone tried to hold the sky in a square box. "We kept it for you," she said again, her fingers brushing a seam in the wall like she was afraid it might fade if she let go. I stepped in, slow, let the air settle around me. It smelled like dust and maybe old hope. I ran my hand over the wallpaper and didn't feel like an intruder. Not this time. Robert checked every window before we left the house, then checked them again. "I couldn't protect you back then," he said, "but I can now. That matters." Jordan texted more than anyone I'd ever met. Some days I got 13 messages before noon. You eating today? You up yet? Come to the park. We'll toss a ball around. It was too much. It was also kind of perfect. I wasn't calling myself son or brother yet. The words were there, just quiet, sitting warm in my chest like they were waiting for permission. Owen and I met up at a diner that sat halfway between where I lived and wherever he'd landed. He looked older, but not hard, not like Rodney. He slid into the booth with 2 coffees already ordered. I'm not going back there, he said. Not even to grab a jacket. I want a real brother, Caleb. You in? Yeah, I said. Me too. We got pancakes like we were 6 years old again, and syrup could fix everything. I set clear rules with the Kleins. No cameras, no press, no surprise visits to the search center. They listened. They didn't flinch or try to bargain with me. That's what earned my trust, more than anything. Back at my place, I kept the 6-month cake photo on my desk. Not frame fancy, just clipped to a pinboard. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about making it through. Some days, when the weather hit a certain way, I'd drive past the old apartment behind the barber shop. I never got out, just parked and stared at the second-floor window for a while. One night I said out loud, I don't live here anymore. That was the truth, and it helped. Carla's lawyer sent a letter, said she wanted to write me. I opened it once, skimmed the words. She said she was sorry. She said she still loved me. She said a lot of things that didn't move the needle. I didn't write back. Some doors don't deserve a second turn of the handle. I wasn't healed. That word didn't fit me, but I wasn't alone in the maze anymore. That was the change I noticed. That was the part I decided to keep. The courtroom was quiet when the judge leaned forward and read my real name into the mic. Evan Robert Klein, she said. Her voice echoed a little, bouncing off ceiling tiles and filing cabinets and the old bones of the building. I signed the paperwork with steady hands. The clerk stamped the seal. That was it. Nothing loud, no spotlight, just a handful of signatures and a truth 30 years late. Rodney's line, not my blood, finally answered itself on paper. We didn't throw a party. Elise found a diner with old booths and weak coffee and insisted on pie. She cried and laughed in the same breath when the waitress brought us 4 forks. Sometimes ordinary is enough, she said, dabbing her eyes. Robert sat across from me, quiet and calm. He squeezed my shoulder like he was making sure I was real. I didn't flinch. Jordan showed up with a rusted bike bell from a thrift store. You're 30, he said, grinning, but I say it's never too late to learn. We walked the bike path behind the search center. Just talked. About nothing. About everything. He threw a stick for a dog that wasn't ours and missed the trail marker twice. It finally felt ordinary. Owen came late, stood near the edge of the lot like he wasn't sure if he still belonged. I waved him over. He looked like he might bolt, but he didn't. You look like you sleep better, he said. I nodded. Some. He stayed a while, talked low. Said he was renting a place near downtown. Said he didn't want anything from me except time. Later, the prosecutor called. The sentences are in, she said. I didn't ask for numbers. I just asked if the official record showed what happened. She paused. It does. That was enough. On quiet mornings, I walk the hallway at the Klein Search Project. Before the phones start ringing, I stop in front of a new face and say the name out loud. Not like a prayer, like a reminder, like someone's still listening. I keep the fake social security number framed on my desk, not as a badge, as proof. I outlasted the lie. I'm not the kid who slept in a car behind the bowling alley. I'm not the 18-year-old dumped with 2 suitcases and a lie for a birth certificate. I'm not a shadow Rodney could erase with silence. I'm Evan. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a man who helps bring other people's kids home. Looking back, I see it clear. The quiet cut was never about what I wasn't. It was about what they couldn't take. I got my name back. I got my family back. And every time I pass that wall of faces, I do the one thing Rodney never planned on. I keep showing up. Before you go, what boundary or name change moment helped you take your life back? Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Even something as simple as great story means a lot to me.